This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10-5 and 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
Thanks for joining us, podcast listeners. It's great to have you with us for part 2 of Terry Hutchinson's pod. If you haven't already listened to part 1, it's perhaps worth scrolling back. It's a real insight into Terry's early relationship with the America's Cup. I feel you also begin to know what makes him such a force in yacht racing. We hear all about Terry's early career in the Grand Prix end of the sport and America's Cup world. There's even a Dennis Conner story. We all love a DC story. In this episode, we're in Auckland, reliving American Magic's roller coaster of a cup. This time, though, through the eyes of the boss. It's emotional, real, and in the closed, secret world of the cup, it's a privilege to glimpse inside the reality of the push for perfection. Before we hear from Terry, a quick and very gentle reminder that you can now support the podcast through buymeacoffee.com. It's very simple, very easy. Head to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. And if you enjoy what you hear, click on an amount that you think is about right. A little support and we can keep making the pod without having to interrupt our interviews with ads, which I don't think any of us want. We also mentioned in the intro to part 1 that when we recorded this, we were still in Auckland. And although it had been 6 weeks since the American team had been knocked out of the Cup, it was still very raw for Terry. He appeared to be carrying the weight of his team, the supporters, members, and sponsors all on his shoulders. Maybe we were a bit soon recording the pod, but in context, it's a privilege to listen to one of the most ruthless sailors on the track struggling to come to terms with losing. It goes without saying, it was difficult for Terry at times, but we're very grateful for his time and his commitment. I hope you enjoy the time I spent with American Magic skipper Terry Hutchinson.
The last 3.5 years probably, without question, have been the hardest that I've experienced. It's so cool because you're going so fast, and yet at a certain point in time, the speed's irrelevant. Before the boat had even capsized, I had my knife out and I was hacking away at it.
You weren't involved in Bermuda, as I recall.
Correct.
But obviously, you had an eye on what was going on as New Zealand won. Approaching the New York Yacht Club, how easy was it to convince them to put up a challenge for this cup?
It's probably more of a question for Commodore Lotz and Elwell, but I think when we first met with Rob and I first met with Commodore Lotz and Commodore Elwell kind of in July of 2017, after we got the go-ahead from Hap and Doug to at least start the dialogue and conversation to see if they were interested. And 3 months later in October, we announced that we were going to be in this crazy journey together. And, I don't think I don't know probably the intimate details from the club side of the conversations that went on. I can tell you, though, sitting here, that eternally grateful to have the opportunity to represent New York, because, again, you don't realize it at the time, but the New York Yacht Club brand and its history and legacy inside the America's Cup, it's an obvious statement, but I don't think I knew or appreciated the significance of what it meant. And when you talk to more club members and how passionate they are about the America's Cup, the Cup in so many ways defines the New York Yacht Club. And yet the club also did an incredible job from that moment in 1983 to today in redefining itself in the sport of sailing and being a leader in the sport of sailing. And so the club no longer needs the America's Cup, and yet I can't think of a better spot than 44th Street for the Cup to live for a couple of years. So in that regard, it's it was really, we were really, really fortunate.
Like getting a project like this off the ground is incredible. I mean, so much has to come together. What was that day like when finally, the club had said yes?
Yeah.
You had, enough money to press the button. Was it exciting or scary? I mean, how was that, Terry?
Scary. Scary to the extent that about a week before we announced that we were doing it, I communicated to Happen and Doug that, guys, are you sure about this? I put up the big red flag because I was terrified about it. Not terrified, that's overstating, but I was worried enough because I knew, and I think we all knew at the time, and I felt responsible to making sure that we didn't waste the resource. And so not only do you feel that responsibility, but you also feel a responsibility to the 3,200 members and making sure that we represent the New York Yacht Club in the appropriate way. So I was really nervous about it because we were definitely diving into the unknown, especially with the boat that was being considered and the amount of. I'm not surprised, but sitting here now, the last 3.5 years probably without question have been the hardest work-wise and energy-wise that I've experienced. And you almost welcome a day of, 52 racing or Mel's 24, J70 racing where it's just you and 65 other teams out there yelling at each other, because in some ways that'll be a lot easier than what we experienced. And yet, that's half the challenge too. So, I can't, I vacillate between, I cannot wait if we're given another opportunity to do it again. If we're fortunate enough to be in that position, I can't wait because, it's the thrill of the competition as much as anything.
One of the questions I've enjoyed asking here is about the boats themselves, the AC-75s. I mean, can you remember seeing the concept for the first time?
Yeah.
What did you think when you saw it?
What did we think? I don't think we gave it much consideration. I think Phil actually said to Happen Doug, if you guys don't want to do this, it's okay with us because it was that far out there. But I think we all saw it as that's the opportunity too. That's the real opportunity here is to be better at designing and better at learning how to sail, and how can we set ourselves up to do that. And that was definitely the exciting part about it. I mean, the boat itself, now sitting here and having the opportunity to race at the speeds that we were racing, so cool. It's so cool because you're going so fast, and yet at a certain point in time, the speed's irrelevant because there's another boat out there that you're trying to beat, and you're not even thinking about how fast you're going.
You were the first to launch a small test boat, first to launch boat one, out there getting to grips with foiling a monohull. How big a challenge was that? It's a pretty out there concept. We
were fortunate with the people that we had, in particular with Dean and with Paul and with Andrew, because they had experienced, Dean obviously had experienced all the foiling cups, and so he was quite proven at it. Paul Goodison, obviously, a 3-time Moth World Champion and Olympic gold medalist, tuning partner to Shirley Robertson. So you know how good he is. And then Andrew Campbell, who did the 2017 cycle with Oracle. And, those 3 guys really, in retrospect, carried our program and a lot of the development of our program because of their experience. And so in that regards, it was, you always felt like we were in a good spot. And then we had our partnership with boating partners and all the great experiences that we've had with our boats. You know, you could feel, I felt confident in us and still do, primarily because, you know, you could always feel like we had the right people for the job. I don't know if I actually answered it, but it was, you know, when we launched the Mule and we started sailing in the Mule, it's like, this is so cool. This is so cool. I can remember ripping around Narragansett Bay in the fall of 2018, in October and November of 2018. And it was like, man, this thing is, you know, you're going upwind on that. You know, it's a 38-foot boat and we're going upwind doing, you know, 29, 30 knots. And you're going downwind doing 36, 37. It's like, this thing is unbelievable. So yeah, that was awesome.
When you got down here, Terry, and everyone started sailing, you know, where did you think you sat, design and performance-wise? I mean, it all happened very quickly, didn't it? But what were your initial thoughts on Patriot and her performance?
I'm very confident in the quality of the boat that Patriot is, and you know, the reasons that we talked about earlier, I think, is, you know, one of the leading drivers to why we're not sailing next week. And you know, we were the first team to put boat 2 in the water. We were the first team out doing, you know, developing and trying to improve the quality of Patriot. And, you know, that was, in my mind, that was on display at the Christmas Cup. You know, we went out on the first day and beat Ineos and beat the Defender on our first day of racing in an AC 75. And so in some ways that validated a lot of the decisions that we had made up to that point. And through that regatta, you know, the boat and the team continued to perform and improve. You know, we lost a race to Luna Rossa and we lost a race to Team New Zealand, of which in both those races we won the first cross. And so the other side that it tells you is that the fleet is also relatively close. But at that point of the competition, you know, we probably all breathed a sigh of relief because we realized we were not out of it. And I know our neighbors here at Ineos copped a lot of flack because they didn't have a great regatta, but we also knew they weren't out of it as well, because you knew through science and through all the work that we had done in analyzing their hull and their foils that they had a good package with that boat, and it was simply a matter of sorting out the control systems and getting some of that working in the right way, and you know, they did. So, which wasn't, you know, that definitely did not surprise me. I mean, they're a great team in their own right. So I think when Patriot went in the water and we got through that racing, we were relieved, because you knew that you know, you at least the previous 3 years had not been for nothing. So that was good.
It was, I mean, it's been an interesting cup, isn't it? Because no one really had seen anyone else until you all arrived here and got out on the Hauraki Gulf.
Yeah.
You know, was there anything on any of the other boats that sparked your interest? Did you think anyone had something that you were worried about back at that early stage when you were first here?
Well, you know, we started sailing in July, and we were the only team here. Both Ineos and Luna Rossa didn't start sailing until October in New Zealand, and so we were, you know, we had sailed Defiant really for 3 months of her time here with the Defender in and around the water. So the first thing that stuck out to us was the Defender was sailing modes and developing at quite a bit faster speeds than what we were, and that was a concern, because so much of the development and so much of the boat is based around the apparent wind angles and speeds that you're sailing and the loads and that circle that happens in performance. You know, that was a relatively big eye opener to us, and so you'd have to raise that as a red flag of concern. At the time, we raised it as a red flag, and even sitting here, it's like, wow, they're on to a different, you know, how did they get there? Why did they get there? And what have we missed really. And then, when we saw Luna Rossa launch, when they first put their boat 1 in the water, we saw them launch with the 2 helmsmen. There was a lot of discussion around it. We weren't sure, the reasons why. Sitting here now, we know, that it's a pretty, it's a smart way to develop the boat. I don't think that system, how they're set up, beats a boat that's faster. So, but it certainly has allowed them to race well and develop well. The other things that we saw through the course of the program, Luna Rossa spent a lot of time with a catamaran, developing the boomless option in their catamaran, and then they launched with it, and it's a pretty nice system, and you can see it. And yet, at the time of launchings, us, Team New Zealand, and Ineos all kind of have a variation of a boom. And then June, July, Team New Zealand launches their little mule with a boomless option, and starts to question, okay, what are we missing? But you're so committed to these designs, and you're so committed, the boat is so committed structurally to a certain setup that you can't really tack too much. And the advantage that the Defender has with an extra 3 months is the timing of their mule was a really good time to allow them to experiment with what they saw with the others. And that's exactly what they did. So their timing for that was really, really good. And then, obviously, when Team New Zealand launched their boat and it looked like it does, us and Ineos made big steps in our second boats. The Luna Rossa boat was quite conservative from their boat 1, but it's obviously a very nice boat. And but the Defender, they, in typical Team New Zealand fashion, they went pretty far down the road. The other things that stick out in foil world, Team New Zealand has the smallest set of foils. Our foils under Patriot were just slightly bigger, and then both Luna Rossa and Team Ineos, their foils are quite a bit bigger than ours. And so that always kind of, it makes you question your science and question your development, and go back and revalidate the decisions why. And what was always very encouraging was the science that we had lined up very well to Patriot's performance on the water. And so that always kind of reassured you. And sitting here today, I'm quite confident. I know where Patriot is in the fleet of Challengers.
Let's talk about your role on the boat, Terry. I mean, for the listeners that may not know, you were portside aft grinder.
Yep.
So just in front of the helm. Paul Goodison on the main sheet, Andrew Campbell flying the foils, and Dean Barker steering. How did that work? How easy was it calling tactics and being committed to grinding?
Well, the first thing is I think a lot of the tactical work is done in the pre-start. Before the race even starts. You do a lot of plan A is we want to start here. Plan B is if you're not wide right, then plan B is as tight to leeward as you possibly can be. So we go through a lot of that an hour before the start of the race. And so a lot of the tactical work is being done prior to the start of the race. And, I would cover the port side of the yacht, and Andrew would cover the starboard side. And between Dean and Goody, they have a good balance on the open course. So, it's hard to not hear the critics of that setup. And yet, I'd say anybody that really criticizes it, they're picking at something at low-hanging fruit because they don't really know because they haven't been on the boat. So I would caution anybody who wants to throw stones at any of our setups simply because, the boats are developed and done in a manner that you give everything kind of equal weighting. And when you have somebody as skilled as Dean and as skilled as Goody and as skilled as Andrew, it's hard to say that the boat's not covered tactically. I mean, you can almost argue that we're covered too much tactically. And you look at the evolution of Luna Rossa's racing. They're using their main sheet trimmer a lot more as just kind of looking around. But, Jimmy and Kiko still make the decisions on their respective sides. So they're not operating in that environment either. Ben's setup was was the most traditional of all the boats, and yet, they had a good round robin, but in the finals, I don't know if I know Giles is an incredibly talented sailor, but none of us are good enough to overcome a slower boat. So I would continue to advocate to have a fast boat, and a fast boat makes tacticians look really good.
We all like that.
Yes, we do.
Just take you back to pre-Christmas. I mean, as you say, NES Team UK were looking in terrible shape. American Magic were a great-looking boat, fast in the breeze, winning races. How did that all feel? Momentum gathering, I guess.
It all felt about what you would expect, because I felt like we had planned for it. And I felt that we were prepared for that regatta, and that, we were just following our path of development. So, I think part of the challenge of making sure the team is always going in the right direction is that whether we're winning or losing, you don't know the difference, because every day is the same. And so that was very much matter of fact. And the things that concerned me when I look back at it were there were a lot of people that were riding the high of having a good regatta. In my mind, that was the expectation. And so there should be no highs and lows here. It's sport, it's competition. We should be prepared to win, and we should be prepared to lose, because it's sport. And it's not really, you have to follow the full cycle of it to make sure that you get to where you want to go to in the end. But as I said earlier, I was quite, part of me was just relieved, because thank the Lord that the boat's fast, and the work that we had done was good. And there were areas that we could be better. We made a lot of decisions from November to December to get into the boat for that regatta, to kind of test it against the fleet. And in hindsight, maybe, we only had a couple things left on the shelf in absence of us, tipping the boat over and taking ourselves out of action for 10 days. We didn't have a lot left on the shelf to get better. We had a couple things that were going to help us get better, but, some of it was maybe not going to net the performance gains that we were going to need.
It was a bit of an odd makeup, this cup. 3 challengers, 1 semi-final. So you didn't actually need to win races until after the round robin. But 4 races in, American Magic was yet to score.
Yeah.
How concerned were you then?
Well, the first race we lost to Ineos, and we got the start that we wanted, albeit we were a couple seconds off the line, and that had a little bit of an impact to the first port tack off the line. And in that race, the first beat plan didn't work, but we were only about a length behind them at the top, and we took the wrong gate mark. So, it comes back to it's not the first mistake in the race that gets you, it's the second one. And the second one was going the left gate at the top, and we spotted Ben too much distance. The next 2 races on Saturday was really light, and we were too aggressive in the pre-start and not mindful enough of just staying on the foils. That was the priority, is to stay on the foil. And, I know for certain none of us communicated that in the pre-start, and we came off the foil. And so after Saturday, we were 0-3, and, Sunday was a new day, and we had a good forecast. And so I think we went out and had a good warm up, and, we were feeling, I think what we saw on that day was a great representation of Patriots' performance. And unfortunately, Mother Nature had an alternative plan for us. We popped a big wheelie and blew a hole in the boat. We sank an airplane in salt water and flew the thing 9 days later. When I pushed myself up to get air, I got salt water. Then the second time I pushed myself up, I got a little bit of air and I got a lot of salt water.
It was January the 17th, the
Yeah.
day I'm sure you won't forget.
Yeah.
Leading against Luna Rossa on a very windy, blustery kind of race day. Patriot capsized. What was the race and the weather situation going into that capsize?
The race was pretty dynamic. There had been a couple storms rolling through from the West Coast. Luna Rossa and Ineos had a race abandoned as one of the storm cells passed, and we were sitting over in next to Rangitoto when that storm went through, and we had 35 knots at the top of our rig, so it was spicy for sure. And when we got up to our race with Luna Rossa, I think we felt pretty good about it. We were a little bit unsettled in the pre-start. We had a zipper issue last minute on our J3, so we went to the backup J3, and that put us a little bit out of position for the entry, but we managed most of it and got to the left of Luna Rossa up the beat, and Patriot did the work for us that she was designed to do. And I think, as you rightfully pointed out, we stretched out to about a 600-meter lead. The hard part of that race was it was noticeably getting lighter at the bottom of the track, and on the right-hand side of the race course as this cell was approaching us. And, we got down at the bottom of leg 4, and we went around the right-hand gate, but we rounded the bottom mark in 9 knots of breeze, and we had a J3 on, and, we were set up for 17 knots of breeze. And so, you're always a little bit nerve-wracking based on our previous day experience where we sailed into a lot of holes and got caned. So you're gun shy with all of it. Going up that second beat, or that last beat, we had we had a good beat. We positioned ourselves in good spots against Luna Rossa and kind of defended against the breeze, getting lighter. And as we were coming into the top mark, there was about a 100-meter bias to the right-hand gate. But there was also a really clear comm from Andrew that it looked really light down the right-hand side. And so the bear-away jibe, while a distance gain, felt risky because it was just, it was light over there. So, I don't know, it was probably 25 seconds from the top mark. We got hit. The breeze went from about 13, 14 to about 18, 19. And you could feel the energy on the boat get a little bit excited because it was a big left shift. We went from, sitting on our number to crack sheets at 60 true, and, going into that top mark at 45 knots.
We're going to pause, Terry, there and take you on board American Magic as the foiling monohull powers towards that top mark. First, you'll hear helm Dean Barker, briefly Andrew Campbell and Paul Goodison, as the crew try and negotiate the fearsome gusts coming down the course.
It'll be quite hot coming back to the finish. Get wide here, Dan. Big east on the chip. I think there's a spot to move a barroway drive, man. It's going to be a hard manoeuvre. It's going to be a real hard manoeuvre to take barroway. Standing by. Keep going. Go, Goody. Two, one more down. Turning. I'll stay here. Turning down in 3, 2, 1. Turning down now.
In retrospect, the thing that I regret the most is just not, chirping up and saying, having the presence of mind to say, hey, just protect the asset here because we have a big lead. And, but the previous leg, we'd done the exact same maneuver. And so, as you're playing it in your mind, it's only blowing 17 knots. What's got the adrenaline going is that it's a big left shift, and you're going 45 knots. So it's things are coming at you, and Goody had good comms of, hey, it's a hard maneuver. So the communication was happening, but Dean's got to make the decision, and I back his decision because I know, in particular, at that exact moment, had we borne away at that speed, we were going to be out of bounds really quickly on the short side. And the jibe in that maneuver, turn up to go to the finish, that's not a walk in the park either. In fact, it's riskier than, sitting here, I would say it's riskier than what we did. But we went for the tack bearway. In our debrief, there's kind of two stages, and you can see it pretty clearly in the video. Goody steers the boat out of the maneuver, kind of gets the boat settled. We do a good speed build, and then Dean commits to the bearway from the leeward wheel. The hard part in that was the Traveler was down for the speed build, so we had nothing really left to give as far as Traveler movement, so it was all going to be done with main sheet. And as we speed built and bore away, we got, the breeze went from 16, 17 to 23, 24. We got hit by a puff, and the leeward foil skidded a little bit, and then the arm grabbed, and we popped a big wheelie and landed obviously hard on the boat and blew a hole in the boat. So when I look back at that moment, the capsize wasn't the issue. We'd capsized Defiant and sailed for another 2.5 hours. I mean, the issue clearly is putting a hole in the boat, and then the knock-on effect of what that meant. In essence, we sank an airplane in salt water and flew the thing 9 days later, and that was an unbelievable effort. And all the way through one of these programs, you have what you believe are the best people for the jobs across the board. And for anybody, whenever we question that, are we the right people? Are we the right team? The team answered whether or not we were the right team over that course of 9 days, even to the first day of the semifinals when the sailors got the boat back. The shore team, the design team, the boat building team, what they did was incredible. And we went out, we got a couple days of sailing, not great sailing, but we got a couple days of sailing under our belt. And then the sailing team gets to go racing for the first time in 10 days, but they have to do it in 20 to 25 knots of breeze. So it was by far not our best day, and we know that. But I do know, having been on the boat and being there and being in the moment of those races, you could not have had a harder day to go and race because it's top end. We're all coming off of our last experience in 20 knots of breeze, and here we were racing against a team that at the absolute worst time of the cycle, we spotted 10 days of time too. And even though I was fully immersed in the punch bowl of optimism, it's unreasonable to think that you're going to give sailors as good as Luna Rossa is that amount of time to prepare and expect to beat them. And that's something that I can say now, 4 weeks away from it. But at the time, I was still thinking about the race that we were 600 meters ahead of them, and that was the Patriot that we knew, and that was the Luna Rossa that we knew. But they made a step in their game, and I think you've heard Jimmy and Kiko both talk about the critical analysis they gave to their sailing skills and their racing skills, and they improved upon them as they were always going to. But it's unreasonable to think that we were going to get past them, spotting them the time that we did at that point of the competition.
As sportsmen and women, we've all sat through the what ifs of disappointment.
Yeah.
But Terry, do you think that moment was the pivotal moment for the campaign?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, that's and as we talked about earlier, I mean, it without question in my mind, it's a pivotal moment. And I have enough information about Patriot to know as well that it was going to be a big ask to get past Luna Rossa in the final or Ineos in the final, and even a bigger task to get past the defender in the match. And so, but we never gave ourselves the opportunity to really even answer that question because of the mountain that we presented to the entire team in that moment. And so it's, I mean, that's what I think it's irony, the crashing.
My goodness, it's a building site.
Yeah. But it is a pivotal time. But as I'm learning through the debriefs and as we knew going through the program, there were always strengths and weaknesses, and you see the picture clearer and clearer as we get further away from January 31st and our elimination out of the competition, and you have more time for debrief process that is given really good information and using the opportunity to learn out of it. As hard as those conversations are to have, I mean, they're brutal for myself and they're brutal for the teammate, because the emotion of it is still, it's all right there. So it's not, in the best of conversations, it's uncomfortable.
I mean, you haven't talked about it very much, but that capsize, you were also in a pretty dangerous spot yourself.
Yeah, no, that was not pleasant at all. And we trained, we did train, and as you point out, I mean, I'm certain that I'm sitting here today because of Sicho and Cooper. While we had practiced and we had done the rescue training and we put ourselves in stress situations, there's nothing like the absolute moment to test where your level of preparedness is for that. And while we had prepared as a team, I can humbly say that I was unprepared as well. And so when I heard Dean say I'm losing the rudder, the first thing I went for was the trip line on my lanyards to get out of the boat. And
you were clipped into the boat.
I was clipped into the boat. And it was, when I didn't get it at the first time, before the boat had even capsized, I had my knife out and I was hacking away at it. What compounded the situation and made it a lot worse was there was a 1x1 square meter hole in the bow. And so straight away my cockpit filled with water and was well below. And then on top of that had the mainsail on top of me. And yeah, I mean, that's not it's definitely not a comfortable spot to be in. I got the first one cut, and I gave myself a better chance, but when I pushed myself up to get air, I got salt water. And then the second time I pushed myself up, I got a little bit of air and I got a lot of salt water. And at that point I thought, I got a lot going on here. And I didn't have the awareness to grab my spare air, which was right there, and stick it in my mouth. And, they had ingrained in us air first, always go for the air. And when I think about the time that I had to get my knife, start cutting on my lanyard before the boat was capsized, I could have just grabbed the air and stuck it in my mouth. But instinctually, if I had to do it all over again, I'd have the air coming out of my left side because I'm right-handed, and I went straight for the knife, and it was an easy thing to grab. I didn't go for the right side. I went, it's like all these little things that lead you to the decisions. And then Sicho went by, and I heard him, I'm literally 3 inches under the water, and I'm getting pulled under by my left side, being clipped into the boat. And I could hear him say, "Cooper, we got to get Terry, and he grabbed me and pushed me up into the mainsail, and I got salt water and some air again. And then I went under and got salt water again. And then Cooper had his knife out, and he cut me out. And they dragged me out from underneath the mainsail, and I got up on the back of the boat. And
it makes me feel funny thinking about it. I'm sure I've just done the same thing.
Well, it's a horrible thing to experience, only because, like I said, I felt like we had done a reasonable job to prepare for it. There was a higher level of fever internally than I would have liked. And the next day we didn't, but 2 days later we went into the pool in Auckland, and we went through the whole thing again. And there they went about as hard on me as they possibly could in the pool, and got me as disoriented as I could be. And then they clipped me to a lead weight at the bottom of the pool completely disoriented with no oxygen, and I had to get the oxygen in my mouth, clear my nose, do all those things. And even there, like I almost, the tapping out is the sign to get you out for the diver who's in the water, whether you were to take his oxygen and stick it in your mouth and help you. And I was able to manage through that, but that's not the most memorable thing, even just sitting here, is missing the first one and then being completely engulfed by water straight away. And it's like, it's just, you can't, there's nothing I'd ever done that had prepared me for that. So I'm thankful for Cooper and Sicho, because they literally did save my life. And, from there, I'm thankful that we got Patriot back to the dock, and that if there was anybody that was compromised, I'm thankful that it was me, because I would hate to have another one of my teammates go through that.
It was such an incredible 10 days, even from the outside, watching Patriot come back to life, watching everybody help.
Yeah. How was that, huh?
Such an amazing community. People were buying you coffee.
Yeah.
So Team New Zealand were helping out.
Yeah, and that's, I'm a little bit remiss in acknowledging and thanking again Ineos and Luna Rossa, and in particular Team New Zealand, who, from start to finish of the rescue operation, and then the local authorities. There was an infrastructure for, as prepared as we felt as a team. What got highlighted was we needed another level of preparation, and so the local authorities here gave us that level of preparation. Team New Zealand helped us immensely, and that's just, so as we go forward, and as we went forward in the competition, obviously we have a huge debt of gratitude to, in particular, the Team New Zealand boat building for getting us back out on the water.
The reality was, of course, that the boat was still pretty wounded in those races. When it was finally over, Terry, I remember interviewing you. You're standing on the back of the boat, and we're in the commentary box, and it felt, I don't know, like it had been such an incredible journey, that last 2 weeks to get to that point, and suddenly it was over, and we could, the world could see that emotion.
Yeah. Well, I think the word I used at the time was brutal, and it still is brutal. And that's the, I think therein lies our opportunity, that if we're given another opportunity to keep going forward, that if we need any more motivation other than that moment, then we probably shouldn't do it. But I'm not sure any of us need any more motivation, because we could see so many things that we did well along the way. And that moment plays a big part in defining the result. And as always, as I'm learning, I'm quick to also say there's other moments that maybe the result's not there anyway, but we never know the answer to that question because of that moment. So, it's, it was really, really hard, and it still is really, really hard. But this is potentially one of the first America's Cups that the sailing community and people outside have rooted for the United States and rooted for the New York Yacht Club. And so how exciting is that? Because if we did nothing else but demonstrate a high level of professionalism, demonstrate that we're a competitive team, and demonstrate that we represent a new face of the New York Yacht Club, it's definitely, again, a little bit more removed from it. It's definitely something that you take a little bit of pride out of, or I take a lot of pride out of, especially in the day and age and the environment that we're living in. And so I am incredibly proud of that fact alone.
Some of the teams here, Terry, have frontmen and sailors, guys who run the campaign and guys who sail on the boats. Terry Hutchinson here in Auckland has been very much the face of American Magic. I'm assuming you've been running meetings, making big decisions. You've been incredibly generous with your time for us with the TV interviews. And I can't imagine what else you had to do. In hindsight, I mean, I know you're debriefing now. In hindsight, do you think perhaps it was all, too much for one man?
I think from your perspective, I can see why people might think it's too much. But that assumes that I'm actually doing everything that you're talking about. So the advantages of Silvio Arriva-Beni running production, and Tyson Lamont and Tim Hackett and Adolfo and Marcelino and Dean Barker and Paul Goodison and Andrew Campbell and James Line, and the team of American Magic is, if you have really good people, then you can kind of pick and choose where you have an influence and where you're involved. And so on the surface, if you assume that I'm doing all the stuff that people think I'm doing, well, then I think what you're saying is right. It is too much. Here I played a spot on the boat where I supported the tactical decision making, and I ground, and I trusted day in and day out the sailors that we had, as much as I trusted Adolfo and Marcelino and the other team members to deliver in their areas. And what we had done a really good job at as a team, and why it's easier to sail, is because there is a clear path of demonstrating time and time again that we were always meeting our deadlines. By the fact that we launched a mule, we were the first to launch a 75, we were first to launch boat 2s. And there was always just a clear demonstration of the level of competency of our team. And so you didn't really feel the need, if it's not broken, I'm certainly not going to get in there and try to fix something that's not broken. The nice thing about being on the boat then is you have an intimate understanding of what the guys need. And when we get to balancing certain decisions of the value of a component on the boat for the performance of it, and is it worth it, being there firsthand and seeing it all, very quickly that it is worth it. And I think that was absolutely the strength of one of our setups.
We talked earlier about taking this on for the New York Yacht Club and the responsibility that brings. How responsible, Terry, do you feel for how the campaign has panned out?
I feel ultimately responsible. I mean, that's part of the job. So, I feel that, our successes and our failures start and stop with me. And I know a lot of our team members would say, well, that's unfair, Terry, you're putting too much on yourself. And that's probably right too, because it is a team, and we do all of this as we do win as a team, we do lose as a team, but somebody has to, help keep it all going in the direction that we need it to. And that was part of my job. And so I'll happily accept the criticism for us being eliminated in the manner that we were. And I'll happily point out all the things that we did really, really well in the same conversation, because it deserves equal billing and equal credibility. The thing that is very powerful and very strong coming out of the debriefs is that, to the man or woman inside of our team, we're in the spot that we're in because of a defining moment of the campaign that was a hand of God. And yes, we can criticize and critique and do all the things that we want to do after the fact to decisions that led to that moment. Having been on the boat and listened to the conversations, I go to sleep at night quite easily when evaluating that decision, because I know it was the right one. And the wonderful position of that is that we don't know any of the other facts. And so I don't really give it a lot of consideration. Maybe it's an annoyance every now and then, but you don't really give it a lot of consideration, because everything that we'd done up to that moment, the results in the Christmas Cup, they speak volumes about American Magic. And, we didn't have 2 great days of racing in the first couple of days of the round robin, but we were having a great race against Luna Rossa. And what we don't know is what would have happened the following weekend. The question never got answered. So
I'm speaking for the group I work for here at the Cup, Terry, when I say that the people you've assembled here have been, to us, a real credit to their team, professional in the extreme, welcoming. And although you didn't come here for accolades like that, I wonder, when you head to the airport and you get on the plane to go home, how proud you'll be of what you've achieved here in Auckland.
Well, yeah, I am, like I said, I'm really proud of it. I'm proud that people were rooting for us. I'm proud that, you can make those comments about us, and that, we sit here as, I've always been your friend, but the fact that I don't think you would sugarcoat something like that, and you see that response that you get from people that you don't know on the street, which is just awesome. And, I think we have a really solid infrastructure, and we have a solid team that we've developed here. And the fact that they conducted themselves in the absence of me, like if, when you interact with them in and around on the street and stuff like that, and you have that experience, and it just speaks volume of the working environment that we created here. And that, the hard part is our measure is a scorecard. And so when I get on the plane to leave, I definitely know I'm going to be sad because we're leaving without what we came for. And at the same time, I do take solace in the fact that we conducted ourselves in a manner that not only the club, but that our principals would have expected us to. And, that has to mean something, but I still use the scorecard as the measure.
Terry Hutchinson, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
it's been
Shirley.
a pleasure.
Thank you. Awesome.
Terry Hutchinson, fiercely competitive and clearly hurting from the events in Auckland. But that relentless competitive nature will see him in good stead, I'm sure of it. And in fact, that's not all from Terry. We were on a call the week before publishing this podcast. So to get right up to date, I asked Terry where things were at American Magic.
Where are we at? So, right now we're in a bit of a hibernation mode. Obviously the operation has been scaled back immensely, and we have a pretty small staff of people, and Patriot and Defiant, and the assets are all in the shed in New Zealand. Sitting here today, really we're waiting for Team New Zealand, I think, and the New Zealand government to iron out the details of if the 37th match is going to be in Auckland or if the event is going to go offshore. So that's kind of the first part of it. And then the second part is, I believe that Ineos and Team New Zealand then have to go and negotiate their way through a protocol that we're hopeful includes a multi-challenger event. There's always been the discussion and the talk that potentially Ineos and Team New Zealand would go off and do their own event for the 37th, and then the 38th would be back in Auckland. And I certainly hope that doesn't come to fruition, because I think that would be a difficult one for us and Luna Rossa and any other team that was developing. That would be a difficult one to swallow. You're automatically giving two teams a leg up in the competition, and I'm just not sure that's in the best interest. I know it's not in the best interest of the competition, but it is the America's Cup, so you understand the pitfalls and of the event. So we'll see what comes out of that. But I think smarter minds will prevail, and we'll keep it in a multi-challenger cycle, and look forward really to seeing the AC-75s back on the water, because it's just, it's just an incredible piece of equipment. So
I'm sure I'm not alone in hoping to see American Magic back out on the Cup racecourse whenever all of those logistics are in place. Having the New York Yacht Club challenging for the Cup is always good for the competition. In fact, I've just seen today some news suggesting they're keen to continue involvement. Although, like everything in the Cup, it's all pretty complicated. Either way, Terry and his team were a great addition to the Challengers in Auckland, and we hope to see them all out on the water sometime soon. A massive thanks to Tim, as always. His commitment to the quality of the audio experience is second to none, and we love him even more for it. Also, a massive thanks to the comms team at American Magic, and in particular the comms director, Will Ricketson, a keen Itchell sailor himself, with a great knack of, in a very understated way, even when the stakes are high, of making things happen, of delivering. Will, I know you listen to this pod, so a massive heartfelt thanks from us both. And don't forget, if you're loving the uninterrupted, ad-free, non-subscription model we're currently running here in the podcast, if you can, maybe head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast and support the show. It's great to have you all along listening to the pod. So also don't forget, if you haven't done, leave us a review, give us a like, or get in touch. We love hearing your thoughts on the podcast. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here. Lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there. Gaining on the lane line.
We're looking at 10-5 and 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.